President Obama says the plane shot down by a missile should snap everybody's heads to attention. But will a mixed message from the administration threaten to be a distraction? This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. The U.S. believes Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine are responsible for the downing of a passenger airliner, killing nearly 300 people. There are still many unanswered questions in an unfolding investigation, like who gave them the missile, trained them to use it, why was that plane targeted, or was it, and more. But there is strong evidence tonight that points to Russia's involvement one way or another. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Jennifer Griffin looks at the geopolitical fallout, particularly U.S.-Russia relations. Ed Henry focuses on President Obama's message on the world stage. But we begin with correspondent Steve Harrigan, who's live in Kiev with a story that seems to be changing by the minute. Hi, Steve.
Brett, European crash site experts from the OSCE are already at the site in eastern Ukraine, but they claim that Russian-backed rebels are not allowing them to do their job. Trying to analyze what happened to the Malaysian airliner is complicated by the fact that the wreckage lies in an active war zone. The sound of Russian-made Grad missiles could be heard in the distance as smoke rose from charred plane parts, bodies, and luggage. Among the dead, one U.S. citizen. Netherlands suffered the worst. More than 170 Dutch passengers were on board. Rebel leaders in the area say they do not possess the plane's black box recording devices, but they also deny shooting down the plane or even having the capacity to launch sophisticated surface-to-air missiles, despite captured recordings that seem to point to rebel involvement. Yes, Major. Down the plane just now, a separatist is heard saying in one conversation. Someone else at the crash site describes seeing chairs, bodies. Are there any weapons, he is asked? Nothing at all, he responds. Civilian things, towels, toilet paper. While both President Putin and President Obama have called for an immediate ceasefire, in Ukraine, emotions are running high.
It's crystal clear that this is the Russian Federation who violated the international law, who crossed the border. They supply lethal weapons, artillery, personal armed vehicles. They supply all these bastards and guerrillas. And this is the Russian government who is responsible for the violation of international law.
Ukraine's fledgling government will be under intense pressure to hit back against the rebels. If the government here decides to make a push against the rebel stronghold in Donetsk, it could really be a bloodbath turned into urban fighting with both sides having heavy armored weapons. Brett, back to you.
Steve Harrigan, live in Kiev early Saturday morning. Steve, thank you. Now to Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry with how the words of President Obama and members of his team, past and present, jibe on the downed plane and a Middle East in turmoil.
Burned by drawing a red line on Syria and then not following through, President Obama is all about caution as he deals with twin crises, declining to demand that Russian President Vladimir Putin take his troops off the Ukrainian border and flatly taking any offensive U.S. military option off the table in the wake of 298 people being killed when the Malaysian Airlines jetliner was shot down.
We don't see a U.S. military role beyond what we've already been doing in working with our NATO partners and some of the Baltic states, giving them reassurances that we are prepared to do whatever is required to meet our alliance obligations.
And in the wake of the Israeli invasion of Gaza, the president again pushed for a ceasefire that has not held in a phone call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
In fact, while I was having the conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu, sirens went off in Tel Aviv.
Those sirens in Israel a sign the world is not quite as tranquil as the president's team has been suggesting. And Republicans are pouncing on the jetliner disaster to suggest the president has been AWOL.
There is American perception of American weakness throughout throughout the world, and we are paying a very heavy price for it, and we will continue to until we have a restoration of American strength.
A stark contrast in the presentations today from the president and his own ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. The White House, the president projected a passive tone, saying he didn't want to get ahead of the facts over who was responsible for the shootdown. And he spoke of trying to bring Russia, Ukraine, and pro-Russian separatists together for a ceasefire, while openly acknowledging Putin is holding more cards.
If Mr. Putin makes a decision that we are not going to allow heavy armaments and the flow of fighters into Ukraine across the Ukrainian-Russian border, then it will stop. He has the most control over that situation. And so far, at least, he has not exercised it.
Before the United Nations Security Council, Power was aggressive in pinning the blame for the shootdown on the separatists and declaring any ceasefire is squarely in Putin's hands.
This war can be ended. Russia can end this war. Russia must end this war.
While the president's former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, is suggesting that pressure will have to come from European allies, not the White House.
To put Putin on notice that he has gone too far and we are not going to stand idly by. So the Europeans have to be the ones to take the lead on this.
Now, Fox has just confirmed the last few moments from a senior administration official that the president is authorizing an extension to the deadline in terms of Iranian nuclear talks. They were supposed to be facing a deadline this Sunday. It's going to be extended now until late November. That could give more time to get a deal, obviously, but they could face a lot of criticism from not just Republicans, but Democrats on the Hill who said they wanted that deadline, otherwise new sanctions against Iran. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. With signs pointing to at least some Russian involvement, the downed plane is escalating Russia's tensions with the West. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has that story.
Ukraine's Interior Ministry says this video shot by a police surveillance squad at dawn today shows the actual missile launcher that was used to shoot down the Malaysian plane. It was heading toward the city of Krasnodar near the Russian border. The Pentagon could not confirm the video's authenticity, but U.S. officials said repeatedly today the separatists could not have fired an SA-11 surface-to-air missile by themselves.
Because of the technical complexity of the SA-11, it is unlikely that the separatists could effectively operate the system without assistance from knowledgeable personnel. Thus, we cannot rule out technical assistance from Russian personnel in operating the systems.
It is a sophisticated piece of technology, and it strains credulity to think that that it could be used by separatists without at least some measure of Russian support and technical assistance.
3 weeks ago, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander warned the Russians were training separatists to use sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons.
What we see in training on the east side of the border is big equipment, tanks, APCs, anti-aircraft capability, and now we see those capabilities being used on the west side of the border.
In separatist-controlled Ukraine, U.S. defense officials said they have no reason to doubt the authenticity of the intercepted phone calls released last night by the Ukrainian government, in which rebel commanders claim to have shot down a plane.
We have just shot down a plane. That was Miners Group. It fell down outside Kyiv.
Russia's ambassador to the United Nations tried to deflect the blame to the U.S.
Kiev chose the wrong path, and their Western colleague prodded them, and I'm talking about the U.S. here, and pushed them to escalate the crisis.
Pentagon officials said today that the 10,000 to 12,000 Russian troops that had been deployed to the Ukraine border in recent days have not yet pulled back. They are continuing to mass along the border in the wake of the Malaysian plane attack.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you. Well, what do you think President Obama should do to address the growing turmoil in Ukraine? Let me know at facebook.com/BrettBairSR or on Twitter @BrettBair, and you can use the hashtag Special Report. Up next, we go live to Gaza, where Israeli troops are taking over tunnels used in rocket attacks. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 59 reporting on an Indiana University student who was aboard the Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 that was shot down Thursday in eastern Ukraine. 25-year-old Carlin Kaiser, who was from Amsterdam, was a doctoral student in the chemistry department. WOGX is covering the saggy pants law in Ocala, Florida. It's now illegal there to wear your pants 2 inches below your waistline. The police chief told the city council his goal is not to arrest people, they just need to comply with the new ordinance. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from our affiliate there, WTXF. The big story across the river in New Jersey. 5 colleges are now experimenting with offering students college credits for showing what they have learned from their jobs and life experience. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.